Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for the second video where I talk about my series. And I'm going to talk about series that I need to continue that I've already read. I already read at least more than one book from that series. Okay, and excuse me while I move things around on here. Okay, so let's get started. The first one that I want to continue next year is the Barsetshire series by Anthony Trollope. And I need to read the second book in the series, Dr. Thorne. This is a series about an English village, focusing mostly on church politics, or at least the first two books. The first book was The Ward. The second book was the I used to know how to pronounce it. The second book is the Bar Towers. I can't think of what it's called for some reason. There's what is it? Barchester Towers. The first one was about the warden of the church or the warden of the hospital. He was called out on making too much money, and he felt guilty about it. And he had to be called out by his daughter's fiance, or the guy that was interested in marrying her. And it turns into this big drama. And then the second one is about the archbishop of the church has passed, and his son assumes he's going to take his father's place. But then some outsiders come in, and it's this whole competition between the original archbishop's son, and the new people. And there's just a lot of drama there. And I don't know what the third one is. I just know that there's a bit of a romance in the third one, although the first two books also had romance too, of course. But I'm guessing the third one is about a doctor, Dr. Thorne. And I think he wants to marry this woman who's, beneath his station, or she's beneath his station, something like that. Which I feel like that's always the case in those kinds of dramas. And then next is the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. I still have to read the second book. And funnily enough, this was one that I took forever to finally get the second and third book. And there's 4 books in the series. And finally, I think it was 2 years ago, Terry from Florida gave them to me. Because we do, gift exchanges, and she gave me which I was so happy about that, because it's like, no one else was seeing that it was on my list, on my Amazon wish list, so finally no one else getting it for me, so I was like, and I was just so happy. And the problem is, unfortunately, Books A Million did not have them, so I'm gonna, if I can, I put them on my wish list, so that maybe someone get it for me for my birthday or Christmas, and if not, I will buy it myself. But and now that I'm on third books, I have a better chance of buying some of the ones that aren't in my Books A Million, find them myself. But that's the second book, and it's in a world where there's humans and giants, and there's this war between humans and giants, and there's also a prophecy that the Black Sun and the Morning Star are gonna, come, and they're gonna battle it out, and they're trying to figure out who is who in this war. And there's one particular prince who thinks he's the hero and he's the Morning Star, but I'm not sure if I believe that. I don't think he is. I think that'd be too easy if he was it. I think it's gonna be someone else. There's multiple POVs. There's that guy's POV, then there's this teenage boy's POV, and he wants to be a soldier, and then there's recently his mother and the guy who kind of became like his tutor, his we're like getting ready to tell him that, okay, something we have to tell you, and of course he's all mad about it. He does not want to know about it, because he's like, no, I'm gonna stay loyal to these guys, and how could you do this to me, kind of mentality, which I found like typical teenager, it's hormonal angry teenager. and then there's his sister's point of view, and there's a couple other characters' points of view, and well, more than a couple. There's a lot of points of view, and it's really good so far. But there are a lot of cliches and tropes. But I think the author does try to deviate from the tropes a little bit. Like I think he introduces the trope, but then surprise, it's not like I feel like just like with Brandon Sanderson. So I did start the second book. I haven't continued yet though, but I'm gonna read it soon. Okay, and then and it's actually an easy read. You know, I feel like a lot of today's fantasies are pretty easy reads. It's just they're long. The next one is The Wheel of Time, which is a little more dense. And I need to read the second book of The Great Hunt by Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. And I know I'm all prepared for the middle slog. There's a slog in the middle, and it's funny that as I always say, it's kind of funny that I'm like, I didn't think I could read Lord of the Rings. I was, dead set against it because I was so used to the movies, and I just can't bring myself to pick up the book when I've seen the movie. And yes, before anyone says anything, in the case of Lord of the Rings, yes, the books have so much more, and the movies have to take out a lot of stuff, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it before. But to be fair, I have listened to the audiobook, and that does count as reading. Even if I'm not physically staring at the pages. And sorry, I know I keep bringing that up, but that just bugs me how there are people that are like, that doesn't count if you're listening to books, and if you're actually listening, not physically staring at the page. That's the only difference, is someone else is reading it to you. You're not actually staring at the page and reading the words. And yes, I know that a lot of times, as Theo Donahue pointed out, that a lot of times you're doing different stuff when you're listening to audiobooks. And I don't drive, so I find it a little bit hard to find an opportunity to, be motivated to listen to an audiobook. But anyway, we're not talking about that. I brought that up because I feel like Robert Jordan, from what I've heard, he has a similar writing style to Tolkien with all the details and stuff. And I just feel like, would someone tell me that, if you like Robert Jordan, why don't you want to physically read a Tolkien book? So I always just think it's funny and wonder, would people say that? Would people be like, well, if you can read Robert Jordan, you can read Tolkien. But anyway, so I have to read the second book. I liked the first book, another, older fantasy that has probably a lot of tropes and cliches and stuff like that. But I enjoyed the first book. It was fun. And I think I'm going to like the second one as well. Because, again, I've said this before, I'm easy to please. I mean, yeah, I have my limits. And if I know that I'm not gonna like it, then I won't pick it up. And I have to decide if it's a genre or a book that I normally wouldn't be 100% interested. I have to discover it on my own. I won't be motivated to read if someone tells me directly to read it. Like, if I see on a BookTube channel someone talking about a book and recommending it, and they're not talking to me specifically, then yeah, I'll give it a shot. But anyway. So, yeah, I still have to read the second book. It's a 14-book series, too, so it's a long series. Next is the Rhyrea Chronicles, which was originally published as an ebook, but then eventually the books were so successful, the author decided to publish them in 3 volumes. There's 2 novellas in each volume. I have to read the second volume, which is The Rise of Empire. And the first one introduces Royce and Hadrian, who are these guys, these masters, these guys who will retrieve things and will steal things for you professionally. And they are recruited to steal a sword, but little do they know that the sword is being held in the room of a king and it looks like, and the king has been assassinated, and they come in just as the king was just assassinated, so it looks like they did it, and his son, who is now the king, has them arrested, but his sister, the princess, knows better, so she makes a deal with them and says, I will let you go, help you escape, but you have to bring my brother along, because I need you to go to see this guy, this powerful wizard or whatever, who was my former teacher, and break him out of prison, because I know what's really going on, and I need this guy out. And there's this whole Lost Heir plot line, and there's these two guys that are, and they have that typical like complete, that friendship type plot where they're completely different people, but they bring out the best in each other. Just like with romantic couples, they're friends that just bring out the best in each other, and I just love them together. Royce and Hadrian are, they kind of remind me um, of Locke and Jean a little bit. At least their friendship, their personalities are different, but they remind me, their friendship bond and their relationship kind of reminds me of Locke and Jean's friendship bond. So I gotta read volume 2, and then there's only one more volume, and then the author has written other books, like a prequel series as well, so I want to read that one too. Okay, so next is the Witcher series, and I got to read Baptism of Fire this coming year in 2021. I might read it in January, I don't know yet. I feel like I'm gonna wait until the 31st of January before I decide which books I'm gonna read. I mean, on the 31st of December before I decide what I'm gonna read in January. Because I always feel like I decide books I want to read and beforehand because they get so excited because I love making lists. But then by the time that gets around, I will maybe stick with the list for a little while, through some of the books, but then I'll get carried away and put a lot of books on there that I'm probably not gonna get to. And then I ended up going off course a little bit, so I'm gonna wait until the 31st before I pick out the books I'm gonna read for January. But yeah, I do. So I might read Baptism of Fire in January. I don't know yet, but this would technically be the 4th book if you count the 2 short story collections. If you don't count those, it's the 3rd book, I believe, in the series. So it's a little confusing. But this is about a guy, he's known as a Witcher, and he's kind of like, a lot of people describe him as not being like a mutant. He basically, when he was a kid, he was a kid that was chosen, and he was put through a lot of mutations and changes, so he could be like I compare him to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in that he has superpowers and he slays monsters. And his destiny is tied to this little princess who just barely escaped a siege on her kingdom. And she's meant to bring the peoples together and some destiny and all that, and he's supposed to take her in and kind of raise her and as his own. There's a bit of a romance with his relationship with the sorceress Yennefer, but they have a very complicated love story, and she is the mother figure for the princess. And there's war looming, and all the good stuff that comes in epic fantasy. And so far it's really cool. And Geralt, who is our main character, he is a typical broody character, but also snarky and sarcastic personality that we all know and love. And this is not just, the books came out first, but the video games, a lot of people here in America, I think, know the video games. And then now there's a TV show. Although, I feel like you need to read the books because first, before you watch the show, I feel like, yeah, there's times when you can watch the movie or the show first before you read the books. But unfortunately, the first season, a lot of people's criticisms was it was very confusing and hard to follow along. I enjoyed it, but I've also read the books. But a lot of people struggled with it, and it was not executed well. But they are getting another season, so it's just delayed because of the pandemic. So hopefully they'll get better. So yeah, I need to read Baptism of Fire. Okay, so I also put on there, now this is not technically, I don't know if this would be considered a series or not, or, well, more like a duology. But I put on here the Iliad and the Odyssey, because the Odyssey, I think, is kind of a sequel to the Iliad. And it's epic poetry, so it was written, and it was originally told in ancient times. And if you have seen the movie Troy, starring with Orlando Bloom Um, he's the only one I can remember. I think because I had a friend who was obsessed with Orlando Bloom and had a huge crush on him, so she was trying to see all the movies he was in after Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings was his first movie. So now it's like, and she had like a huge binder with pictures of him in it and everything about him, and she's tried to see every one of his movies. So that's the only one. Trying to think of the other actors involved. The guy from the Time Traveler's Wife was in it. He played Hector. And I think he played one of the first Hulk in the more recent movies. Not the TV show from back in the day, but from back in the 80s, but the not Lou Ferrigno, but the movies that came out. I think he did the first Hulk movie. But anyway, I can't think of his name. I'll remember. I know I'm gonna remember as soon as I'm done filming. He's in it. There's a couple other familiar actors I'm familiar with. I cannot think of their names. Diane Kruger, that's one of them. She plays Helen. But there's a lot. If you've seen that movie, then you would probably understand what is going on in the Iliad. It's about the whole Oh, and Brad Pitt. He's the biggest name in that whole movie. I couldn't think of his. I don't know why that was not the first name that came into my head. Brad Pitt plays Achilles. But yes, if you've seen that movie, then you probably could get what was going on in the Iliad. The Iliad is basically that story, but an epic poem, and it's an epic poem format. And I'm sure the movie was used the Iliad for inspiration. And then the Odyssey is about Odysseus, who was a soldier for the Greek side, and he is and it's about him trying to get home to his wife, who has a whole bunch of guys vying for her vying for her affection, because I think Odysseus is dead and his son is trying to protect his mom from all these suitors. And he goes through fights all these monsters, and Odysseus comes across and fights all these monsters, and he ends up on an island for 9 years with Circe, the witch. And then eventually he gets home. He will eventually get home. I don't think that's a big spoiler because this is an old book. And it's basically about his journey. And now Penelope, his wife's name Penelope. I don't remember what the son's name. Telemachus, I think that's the son's name. And there's now a lot of books like A Song of Achilles, Circe, both as by Madeline Miller, and then Penelopiad. I don't know who wrote that, but that's about his wife and her perspective on things, her story. I don't know if there's any more out there, but I think those are the only three that, as far as I know, about from different perspectives other than Odysseus' perspective. Because, of course, it's epic poetry and it was written a long time ago, so it kind of focuses a lot on the Odysseus. It makes him look all innocent and stuff, and he's just the victim. But yeah, so technically, yeah, it's probably not considered a duology, but kind of is and kind of isn't, I feel like. Although I did start with the Odyssey first. Because for some reason, I decided to get the Odyssey from the library first. Now I have it. Okay, so, next is, I actually mentioned this book in my previous series video, but Song of Ice and Fire series. And in that video, I talked about how, just like The Dark Tower, this was a series that I read the first few books, and I did really enjoy them, but then it's a dense book. It's a dense series. So I took a break from it, but I made the mistake of taking too long with my break, and then I finally decided to reread them from the beginning. Now, of course, what's happening now is the same thing that happened before with Song of Ice and Fire series. I have not read Clash of Kings in a while, but I did read the first book. I reread A Game of Thrones, which is what the first book is called, and Clash of Kings is the second book. And I did get pretty far in it. I did get a good chunk read, but I haven't picked it up since. it's a dense book, and there's some times where there's some tedious parts in it that aren't the most exciting. But yeah, I think I don't really have to explain what this one is about because it's a TV show, and it's a TV show that not everyone is happy. Most people are not happy with because of how the last few seasons ended. It was rushed, and I think people should have more faith in George R. R. Martin. Just because it's going to end the same way the show did does not mean it's going to be a bad ending, because at least with George R. R. Martin, he can take the time to explain things and lead up to the events in the last book, so it will make more sense. I think the only problem why people don't like it is because it was rushed, and it felt like it came out of nowhere, the ending of the show, which I think it didn't technically, but I feel like it was a little too sudden. Like, all of a sudden, Dany's crazy and is a mad queen like her father. And I can see where it's not as interesting. It's that the rest of the story is not as interesting, like how things turn out, considering what all we went through the whole series. But I'm still gonna read it because I still love it. I want to keep going with it. I don't care about how the show ended. Yes, I was disappointed with it too, but you know what? I'm not gonna give up on the series just because the show ended crappily. And even if George R. R. Martin ends it the same way, he's gonna have time to elaborate, people. So give it another shot. Even if you didn't like the ending, does not mean it's a bad ending. It just means that it was rushed and it felt out of nowhere because there was no explanation. There was no lead up to it, or at least it was very subtle and quick. Okay, so yeah, that one I need to get to. And then The Seven Waters. I finally have the second book. My copies of the books, though, are kind of like, I have 3 books in mass market paperback, but I have the second book, Son of Shadows, in a big regular sized paperback, so it doesn't look right. But I'm also not going to be one of those people that's because I want to get to it, so I'm not going to go and buy another copy. It's not at Books A Million. It's not at Roast Office. Maybe I would find it at Black Castle Bookshop, but I'm sticking with what I got. I'm not going to be picky. But this is a series about a family in, I think, Ireland. And they're magical, and they're from the old ways. But the world is changing in Britain. They are at war with Britain. And the first book is about Sorcha. I thought it was Sorsha, but a lot of people pronounce it Sorcha. So I think that might be the correct pronunciation. Sorcha. She was supposed to be the 7th son, but she ended up being a girl, so what the heck? And she has her 6 older brothers. She's a great relationship with them. She's kind of a bit of a tomboy. And then one day, her father, who was a widower, gets married again, but the woman he marries is kind of, half the kids don't trust her, including Sorcha. They don't like her. She's changing things. So it's kind of similar to what happened in Winter Night Trilogy, where we are introduced to an outsider that can't be trusted to the family, and the main character is kind of forced to butt heads and do battle with this person, this stepmother figure, and it turns out that this woman is a witch, and she curses her brothers and turns them into swans, and Sorcha is able to escape, but the fairies approach her and are like, we can help break the curse on your brothers, but you cannot speak to anyone. You can't say anything. You can't talk at all. And while you're doing that, you have to make them these shirts made out of made out of nettles that you have to put on them yourself. And you can't speak until you put the shirts on your brothers. So she lives in the forest, hiding from her stepmother, and eventually, though, she comes across the new king of Britain, and they kidnap her, but unfortunately she still can't talk. So it's very complicated, messed up situation. And it does deal with a lot of issues, Sorcha gets raped at one point. So there's a warning for that. She does get raped, and it is very detailed. And it really deals with it. She doesn't get over it quickly, She really is traumatized by this experience. And she is very young. She has not experienced romance or men, and she's a virgin. So, it's really traumatizing for her, and it really affects her in the long run. So I think a lot of people will appreciate that in the first book. And originally the series was a trilogy, but the author, Juliet Murley, has written more books in the series. And Son of Shadows is the second book, and what's great about the series is each book is about a different character that's part of the family, so you could probably read them out of order. Although I talked to Jean from Jean's Bookish Thoughts, and she recommends reading them in order, the publication order, because, it would take if you read it in order, it's more special if you read it in the order. It, is, but yep. So I have the second book. I have probably the third. I don't know what else I have in that series, but I only have 2 other books from that series. Next is The Lost Queen, and I do have an arc of the second book, but the second book is out at stores. So this is a series about the sister of the guy who inspired the Merlin character in the Arthurian legend. And she wants to be, be a priestess and do magic like her brother, but her role is to marry someone, to get married to a king and protect her family and their legacy and make babies. So it kind of sucks for her, and she's kind of, in this first book, she's caught between a knight of Arthur's, Uther, Arthur's father's army, the Pendragon army, but caught between him and being betrothed to this king, this young king, and so I'm sure you can guess what happens there. It does not go well. And then the second book is The Forgotten Kingdom, where it's about her family, her, who she marries and her kids. And I think it's gonna be a trilogy. I don't know yet, but I do have the arc of the second one, The Forgotten Kingdom, but I don't know what to do though, because I feel like I should read the arc first, but then I feel like, the second book is already out, so I may as well buy it. And that's in Wings, Wendy, who loaned it to me, my sister's college roommate, was the one who gave it to me, and, she was like, you could do what you want with it, but you're technically not supposed to sell arcs to people. So I feel guilty giving it to the store because they're not supposed to sell arcs. But I don't know what else to do with it, and it will just take up space on my shelf. Although, like I said this on one of my other videos, that I am getting a new shelf next year. So I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should read the arc or just keep it or give it away, or I don't know what to do. And I don't know anyone else, personally that would be interested in that series. So, unless I gave it to, I mean, the problem is the people that potentially, my friends I can potentially give to them, they live in other states, so I'd have to mail it to them. So it's kind of hard. And then next is the Gentleman Bastard series. I need to read the third book, but I didn't want to read it just yet until I got the 4th book in the series. The third book is called The Republic of Thieves, where we finally meet Locke Lamor's love interest, the woman that he has held torch for. She is finally in this third one. And I believe there's a play involved in the third one, which is really cool. But it's basically about a group of thieves, but it's their thievery is a religion for them. And Locke and Jean are the 2 main guys. It's about their adventures and their friendship, and like I said, there is a love interest that he pines after. The second one involves pirates, which I really thought was cool. The first one is, and it kind of takes place in a world that's kind of, I feel, very Italy-esque, very Venice-inspired. And the third, like I said, the third book is called The Republic of Thieves. Okay, and then the last one I have on this list is the Temeraire series, which I mentioned Naomi Novik in the previous video. The Temeraire series, I read the first 3 books. I have not read the 4th book, Empire of Ivory, which is on my list, on my Amazon wish list. But this is a series that takes place during the Napoleonic Wars, and it's the idea of what if they had dragons back then? How would that affect the war? And our main character, Will Lawrence, is a Navy captain, and they are infiltrating a ship that is going to France for Napoleon, to give Napoleon the dragon. But they infiltrate it and they steal the dragon egg, and Lawrence ends up accidentally bonding to the dragon when it hatches. And he ends up becoming an aviator, a dragon flyer. And it's all about his experiences. In the first book, him training and joining the war. And there's kind of a prejudice against aviators. There's a prejudice between aviators and sailors. And then the second one, he goes to China, I think, in the second one, because the Chinese want their dragon back. And the third one involves, I think it takes place in Istanbul. And then, I don't remember what the fourth one is. I don't know what the fourth one is about. But that's Empire of Ivory. I'm trying to think what Ivory would represent. What that would have to do. Because I think each of the titles kind of refer to the country that they go to. It's just a really cool series, and I love Temeraire. He's so adorable. He's so cute. Even though he's a big giant dragon that can breathe fire. He's still so cute. His relationship with Lawrence is so endearing and so sweet. But there is a bit of a tension there because, there's so much loyalty between the two of them, but dragons do not have as much freedom in England as they do in China. And, they're treated as equals, but in England they just see dragons as beasts, as their pets. So there is a bit of tension there introduced in Throne of Jade, the second book, because of that. And it's so sweet, as Elliot Brooks describes Temeraire, as she describes him, he is like a little puppy dog or a baby human. He's so curious, and he's so loyal and so sweet, but he's developing all these different feelings. He's very highly intelligent, and he's developing his brain and like a human, and he's just so curious and cares about things and is so passionate and it's so funny that in the third book, I think, he tries to get other dragons, the dragons in Istanbul, to join him in allowing dragons freedoms and the right to be separate from humans, and they are not having it. And it's so sweet because he cares so much about this dragon rights, about the rights of his kind to be treated equal to humans. But he also doesn't understand that not every dragon thinks that way, because all those dragons have been raised to be pets and beasts and stuff, so they don't understand, and they have been led to live a certain way, so it's very hard to convert someone to a different way of thinking. But it's such a fun series. I definitely recommend it if you like historical fiction mixed with fantasy. And so that's all I have so far of the series I want to continue with. And then the rest of the next video, I'm not gonna film it yet because I'm wasting, my lunch is sitting in the microwave as we speak. So I'm gonna start that. I'm gonna go eat that, and then I'll film the final video in this. But yeah, so far those are all the ones that I want to continue, and then the rest of the next video will be about series that I've started the first book, but I have not pursued it. I have not continued pursuing it, but I do want to. If you guys like this video, please sure to give a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification below if you want to know when I post new videos. I hope you are wearing your mask. And I hope you are washing your hands and staying 6 feet apart from people. And I hope you are having a good holiday if you celebrate any of the holidays that, whether it's Kwanzaa or Hanukkah or Christmas. I hope you are having a good one, and I hope you are still enjoying your reading and being kind to everyone. Because, again, this is a tough year for all of us. And we all just need a little kindness. And I will talk to y'all later. Alright, bye!